Hey everybody, thanks for watching. And before we get into the video, apologies to everybody who tried to purchase the Never Pay Again membership. I know it was a huge issue with the links. Whoever got through, thanks for your patience. But yeah, we had problems with them. It was multiple links, but the sale will continue until Monday, 5 o'clock. It will automatically delete. Then the links will be deleted. So you have until then now to purchase, because we did have a issue with the links. But when you purchase, make sure you go on merkabahacademy.com first and register. There's no way we can know who you are if your email on your PayPal or your card is different from the email you register with. So make sure you go and register first and make sure that, you know, what you register with, that email, is the same as your PayPal email or your card email. And if it's not, make sure you guys send us an email, but you will be redirected to therealmerkabah.com, you know, after PayPal, and it will give you instructions. Now, this is the fastest way to do it, and it's the best way. So, you know, make sure you guys are registered on merkabahacademy.com first, not Podia. Podia is for people who are not Never Pay Again memberships. If you didn't register on merkabahacademy.com, your account cannot be updated. If you have a different email from your PayPal email, there's no way we can know who you are. So you need to make sure the email is the same, or let us know what email you register with. Again, Podia is for people who are not Never Pay Again memberships. If you have Never Pay Again membership, you don't need to be on Podia. But Podia will be where we'll direct you to if need be. I recommend purchase on Podia, not Payloads, just because you have access constantly to those downloads. So make sure you guys are on there. And again, make sure you register on merkabahacademy.com. And as I said, the Android app is out. Merkabah Academy Pro, it is out. The link is in the description. It's ready to go. And the iOS app is coming. I've been saying that, but everything looks good. It's going to drop. And I'm going to do a video on that, and we're going to have to link in the description when it does drop. So everybody who's a Never Pay Again member will have an email sent to them with that link. So thanks for your patience, and let's get into the video. This is definitely what a lot of people have been asking for, and it's something I've been wanting to get into for a while. I have studied the Zodiac for a long time, you know, most of my life. I was always into it, and people are shocked that I don't talk about it as much, you know, as I talk about everything else. But if you pay attention to how I've been doing the videos and DVDs over the years, it's always a pattern to the way I do it. So if you was, you know, around in the beginning, then stuff is making sense. You can go back to the first couple of DVDs and connect dots now. So I do things in steps, and then you'll see when we get into this video, into this series, you'll see how everything adds up and why we had to wait to this point to get to this, because it's a lot of prerequisite information you must know for this to make sense. Now, a lot of you are already into astrology, you're into the Zodiac, and that's one of the reasons why we are here, because a lot of your understanding on it is wrong. And I know, you know, it's going to make more sense now, you know, in this video, the way I put it out, because you have to look at a lot of things. And one of the things you got to look at, the biggest connection, is the fact that the Zodiac, astrology as we see it today, in some ways, is not like how it used to be. And I mean that as far as, you know, tarot card readings and people looking at the horoscope every day. That wasn't what it was for in ancient times. So, you know, we're going to start out by getting into that and understanding the ancient way, which is the real way. So go back during ancient times, we know many civilizations we can see talked about the stars, talked about the Zodiac, talked about beings coming down, and everything had to do with the universe and do with the constellations or what have you. And it's something that we can't ignore, you know, when we go and look. So we see the Indians, the Native Americans, was really obsessed with constellations, namely the Pleiades, and the ancient Egyptians as well. And a lot of things was done based upon, you know, these star signs, and the Zodiac all over the world. You know, we find it, different cultures, different countries, different animals. So we know when we see something like that, it has to be something to it. So just like we find pyramids all around the world, we find the Zodiac all around the world. So it's something that we can't ignore, and we have to look at, you know, what that's about. So we know today, everybody gets into horoscopes. Everybody wants to know how to feel today, what to do today, what their future is going to be, so on and so forth. And you got to be thinking to yourself, how is it that these people can know, certain things? And a lot of times you read your horoscope and it's bang on. Sometimes you read it and it's like, that's not me. And we have to understand, how does that work? Like, I mean, really think about it. How would that be possible for somebody to look at a chart or look at the constellations and determine your mood or what you should do with your life? Like, how does that connect? How does that equate? So this is what we're going to get into in this video, to understand like how you make that connection between what they call the heavenly bodies and our earthly bodies, our actual bodies. Like, how does that equate? How does that connection work? And it's one of those things to where, you're going to have a lot of people who don't believe in it. These same people don't believe in the Bible, and it's vice versa. You have people who are Christians who religiously, go to their horoscope and want to know their horoscope, and they play the lottery and so on and so forth. But, most conscious people who are not at that level stay away from it, because there's a bit of spookism to it, to astrology and whatever. How does this correspond? But when you go and look, it was an essential part, huge part throughout history that just stopped really recently when things started to become more technological. And as we started to grow out of the religious age into this new, political, technological age. And as I talked about before, stuff when the church was coming up was done away with. The old ways was done away with. So anybody that was an alchemist, anybody that was a real philosopher, they was considered, witches or warlocks. And there was people being burnt for being smart or just making a point about the stars or planets. So we had this going on. But when you go back to medieval times, they had this practice to where it was a law that you could not operate or perform certain procedures on a person if you didn't first check with the moon. You had to check for the position of the moon before they would let you operate on the patient, because it was really important back then. And as you'll see in this video, there was a big connection between, religion and astrology back then that a lot of people don't understand. So you couldn't even, give medicine at certain times without checking on the moon. This was a law. It's one of these things they swept under the rug. So this whole thing has to do with medical astrology, and the ancient Egyptians is where you'll find this talked about the most. And we know the Greeks and the Romans will piggyback on it. You can find it in Persia, and the Arabs actually use it as well. So medical astrology, and medical astrology is really based on the four humors. And you'll understand what I call the humors in a second. So you have the four humors, right? So the four humors would be blood. It would be phlegm, like, mucus, phlegm. You have yellow bile and black bile. These are the four humors. So with the four humors, it's basically dealing with, liquids in the body. And how they understood it back then was these liquids, if they were unbalanced or too much of one or too little of the other, it will cause, mood swings. It will cause you to feel ill. This is how they was able to really look at, and diagnose a person by, these things. Back then they had bloodletting, and they would check your blood, and, yellow bile has to do with urine. And this is what they would check. We still do the same thing to this day. You have a urinalysis, you have a blood test for them to determine what's wrong with you. But this is what they was doing way back then, medieval times. This was, law that you had to do it this way and check with the moon, because the moon played a pivotal role in whether or not they could figure out what was wrong with you and how to fix the problem. So it says here, although the theory of the four humors does appear in some Hippocratic texts, the Hippocratic writers accepted the existence of only two humors, while some refrained from discussing the humoral theory at all. Humoralism, or the doctrine of the four temperaments, which we're going to get into that in a second, as a medical theory, retained its popularity for centuries, largely through the influence of the writings of Galen. Hippocrates' theory of four humors was linked with the popular theory of the four elements, which we're going to get into this: earth, fire, water, and air, which basically is a big deal when it comes to these, proposed by Empedocles. But this link was not proposed by Hippocrates or Galen, who referred primarily to bodily fluids. While Galen thought that the humors were formed in the body rather than ingested, he believed the different foods had varying potential to act upon the body to produce different humors. Warm food, for example, tended to produce yellow bile, while cold foods tended to produce phlegm. Seasons of the year, periods of life, geographic regions, and occupations also influence the nature of the humors formed. As such, certain seasons and geographic areas were understood to cause imbalances in the humors, leading to varying types of diseases across time and space. For example, cities exposed to hot winds were seen as having higher rates of digestive problems as a result of excess phlegm running down from the head, while cities exposed to cold winds were associated with diseases of the lungs, acute disease, and hardness of the bowels, as well as ophthalmies, which is issues with the eyes, and nosebleeds. Cities to the west, meanwhile, were believed to produce weak, unhealthy, pale people that were subject to all manner of diseases. In the treatise, Air, Water, Places, and Hippocratic physician is described arriving to an unnamed city where they test various factors of nature, including the wind, water, and soil, to predict the direct influence on the disease specific to the city based on the season and the individual. Diseases could be the result of the corruption of one or more of the humors, which could be caused by environmental circumstances, dietary changes, or many other factors. These defects were thought to be caused by vapors inhaled or absorbed by the body. We're going to talk about that later because you got to think about that. Vapors inhaled or absorbed by the body. Greeks and Romans, and the later Muslim and Western European medical establishments that adopted and adapted classical medical philosophy, believed that each of these humors would wax and wane in the body depending on diet and activity. When a patient was suffering from a surplus of imbalance of one of the four humors, then said patient's personality and or physical health could be negatively affected. So we have the four humors, and the four humors basically split the body, in four parts. So the four humors, then we have the four temperaments. So four humors, four temperaments that corresponds with the four humors. So the four temperaments would be sanguine, then we have choleric, then we have melancholic, then we have phlegmatic. So basically you have, too much blood, you will have, sanguine. And this would basically deal with emotions. So the four temperaments would deal with your emotions. So we always say, you got a crazy temper, your temper. This is where it comes from, the temperaments. So the four temperaments. So now we have this connection with, so far the moon, with our body, this liquid in our body, which we know how the moon reacts to liquid. And then now we have these emotions. So you got, the four humors, and now we have the four temperaments. And then when you have, let's say, too much blood, you have this, sanguine effect, which deals with basically, and not all the effects are bad effects. Understand there's a lot more, but we won't get into the basic ones. So sanguine would basically deal with you being, optimistic in a bad situation. You're not crazy. You're not, too up, too down. You're optimistic and you're positive, right? So we have choleric. And choleric will basically deal with you being, irritated, being in a bad mood. And you have what melancholic basically is sadness and depression. And then you have phlegmatic, which is basically, you being calm. You chill, you calm, you don't really have too much emotions at the moment. You're really unemotional when this happens. So when you have too much blood, you have sanguine. When you have too much yellow bile, that causes the choleric. Black bile would be, of course, melancholic. Note the melon, has to deal with blackness. So black bile. So that's sadness, depression. Of course, they would give us the word shit, black. And then you have phlegm, which would deal with the phlegmatic, which deals with you being calm and, cool. So again, four humors: blood, yellow bile, black bile, phlegm. And then we have the 4 temperaments. These split the body in 4 parts. Okay. 4 temperaments, choleric, melancholic, phlegmatic, and sanguine. So chart right there, you can see what I'm talking about. And again, the words, we understand these play on words and who's giving us these words. And, you know, we have 4 humors, you know, humor, which you're humorist. Humor has to do with your mood. What type of humor are you in? And then understand, we get the 4 humors. We're talking about BC, talking about 4th century BC. So we get the humors before we get the word human, which we didn't get into the 13th century, the word human. So understand where they got that human from, even though we know hue is like a color. But remember, we talked about yellow bile, black bile, you know, it's colors. We're talking about a time where they're trying to put all this stuff together and words is just bouncing off each other. And we start tracing words back, you'll see where a lot of them came from. And of course, this stuff will be Greek. So we have the 4 humors and we have the 4 temperaments, and they split the body into 4 parts. These 4 parts also correspond to, you know, 4 elements: earth, wind, fire, and water. So these also correspond with the zodiac, which we'll get into more in a second. So you have this, you know, 4 temperaments, 4 elements, 4 humors, the zodiac, and this would basically give us the zodiac man, which this video is basically about the zodiac body. So when you go back in medieval times, this was something that was, you know, it was known. It was something everybody used, understanding the zodiac man.